This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
In this episode of BiCurean, Erik and Aicila talk about necro-politics, freedom, and personal responsibility.
Hi, I'm Erik.
And I'm Aicila.
And together we are the hosts of the BiCurean podcast.
BiCurean is our answer to the polarizing culture we live in.
Tired of feeling under siege and looking for ways to get involved? Then come be a part of a different way of thinking.
Everything from politics to geek culture to current events that polarize us as a society, we explore multiple ways of looking at things.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
So, we decided to do a show on essentially what's happening right now around how different states and different areas want to reopen. And I'm sure that a lot of the people that are listening to us come from different areas, some where, reopening seems like, why didn't we already do this? And other places where reopening is like, no, let's not do that yet.
I like that. I like your voice. Yeah, a friend of mine was referring to the little cartoon, and you're going to know the name, the little dog that's sitting in a fire and saying, it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah, I know. I love that cartoon. I forget who did it, but like the whole room's on fire and he's sipping his coffee and he's just saying, this is fine. I am totally okay with what is happening right now.
Yeah. And there is some, like, part of why that came up for me is there's a reality in that the situation that we're in, this large, 36 million jobs? I don't even know, some crazy amount of job loss and the death toll and the constantly shifting data. We know things aren't okay. It's so overwhelming that,
yes.
Ostriching has some real appeal. Like, let's be frank,
Well, and part of what brought this up for me was a tweet.
An article. Wasn't it an article that you read?
Yeah, it was a tweet. Somebody tweeted an article about something called Necro-politics, and I actually retweeted that on our Twitter.
Which, just to be clear, everybody, this is the second time Erik has done anything on our Twitter. This means he was highly impacted by the article.
That's true. I don't spend a lot of time on social media.
That's fact.
But it was a term that I was unfamiliar with. And interestingly, it really resonated because I feel like that's kind of what's happening. And the simple definition of it is the use of social and political power to dictate how some people may live and how some people must die. Keyword there, must.
Right. And we'll get into this in a little bit more detail. And one of the things that the article was talking about, and I'll post a link to it in the show notes, was the title of it was something like, this pandemic was a crisis until our leadership discovered who was dying, because it's the poor and it's our immigrants and it's brown, black people. And as a country,
or old people. That to me is a big deal, because I've literally seen people say, it doesn't matter if old people are dying.
That would be the lieutenant governor of Texas.
Yes.
Yes. At any rate, we don't need to. Our rage will probably come out, but we're going to try and keep it down. Or I am. I guess I shouldn't speak for Erik. However, the challenge of that is that these populations are disproportionately affected by this disease. And so requiring people, for example, we were talking about before the show, there's some challenges around meat. Meat packing plants are primarily worked at by immigrants and poor people and people of color.
Lower class people.
And these people are being required to work. They're told they're essential. However, their employers, and I'm speaking broadly, so it's possible there are some that are doing a better job, and I haven't actually looked into it. However, in a broad sense, most of the meat packing plants are not doing extra precautions to protect their workers. They are simply following the government edict, and the people who work there are actually required to work in unsafe conditions that could kill them.
Let's reiterate the government edict. President Trump used the Wartime Act that he has gone to a few times on this and made meatpacking plants required to be open. They cannot close. And this was because a rash of them did close after an outbreak of the coronavirus. And the impact was pretty immediate. First of all, there was panic buying of meat. Second of all, there were actually some shelves that were pretty empty in certain areas because, meat is a fresh product. So it doesn't take too many days of no producing happening to cause there to be a shortage.
Right. And there's a challenge, for me I guess I would say as a patriot, as someone who loves our country and loves the ideals that we stand for, yes, I get it. The companies are following the edict. And at the same time, I'm appalled that part of it isn't a commitment to and or a requirement to protect the lives of the workers, that they would be required to go back into a situation that is not following basic precautions so that somebody can have some chicken is appalling to me.
And so what this really all got me thinking about, because I'm appalled as well, was the concept of why. Why would this be important? And literally the only thing I could come up with, and I would love some comments on this if you feel differently, but the only thing I could come up with is that there's a major factor here, and it is that most of the politicians that tend to be Republicans or pretty hard line, I want to say, conservative, but it's not really. I'd say it's more of the people that are capitalist.
Right,
one way or the other.
Which I think capitalists actually are across the gamut. I don't think that's a Republican-Democrat
That's
distinction.
why I don't want to necessarily make this about the political parties, because I think capitalism's bloody jaws are what we're talking about here. And one of the key things that this whole thing made me think about was that if the shelves are empty of meat, people will go shopping and see clear evidence of an impact on their lives. And that doesn't fit the narrative of getting the economy reopened, because everything has to be okay.
Right.
And that's where the necro-politics part comes in, because they're saying that acceptable losses in meatpacking plants so that we can maintain, and this is going to be my next catchphrase for the episode, consumer confidence.
Right. And let's be clear, consumer confidence is a really important thing right now. And it's not a bad thing to want to prioritize. One of the false dichotomies, and we tend to, in some ways our show is about disrupting this idea that one thing opposes another. So we're pretty anti-false dichotomy, in some ways, dichotomies in general. But one of the false dichotomies that keeps coming up in this pandemic is the economy versus the preservation of life. And the reality is we need both. Yeah. And I would say it's the prioritization of the lives, the health and safety and the lives of our people, as well as the health and preservation of our quality of life or our way of life, which includes a wide array of things, including our economic freedoms, our small businesses, our religious observations, our liberties in general. And we need all of it. We shouldn't sacrifice one for the other or decide that one is more important than the other. Both are crucial for a thriving, healthy society and for a fundamental right we have, which is the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. And again, I agree. But the one thing that politics hasn't been able to do, first off, there's people out protesting because they took our rights. Okay, I hear you. And you know what? Like Wisconsin in the last few days was forced to reopen because their Supreme Court found the edicts to close to be unenforceable. That was the argument.
Mm-hmm.
And so now people are just going to go back. And it's going to be a mad experiment to see if there's flare-ups of the virus and all of that. Because what's going to happen is anywhere that reopens and then suddenly has, New York levels of infections, and I'm not talking about numbers-wise, I'm talking about percentages, and that's just because New York being such a close-knit place, like you have 1 foot of personal space in New York, and that's...
Are you sure you get that much? I don't know.
But that's the thing, right? So we might see hotspots, we might see things coming up, and that's really going to rock people.
Yeah. I saw a really great comedian commentary. I love comedians. It said, it's give me liberty or give me death, not give me liberty and give me death. And in terms of talking about some of these things. And for me, one of the challenges that I have around the protesters, and I've had some Facebook scuffles over this, is that I am 100% opposed to some of the things that I've seen. The brandishing of weapons in public spaces in ways that feel potentially at least intimidating.
That's unacceptable. I don't care if you can bring guns into your state, political institutions legally. Don't.
Well, and the thing is, okay, but that the intimidating faction of that, the anti-Semitic, racist, white supremacist messaging, and to a certain extent, the shallowness. I need a haircut. However, the fundamental concern about our government essentially overreaching their authority, which they have, and the concern that they have that the government will keep that authority is not unwarranted. Just today, the Senate passed a bill or an expansion to the Patriot Act, which allows the FBI to, without any kind of warrant, conduct surveillance on people's browser and internet history, not even their activity, their history. And the Patriot Act itself was a governmental overreach that was authorized supposedly as a temporary response to a crisis. And it has been re-upped multiple times by Congress and the Senate, regardless of what party was running them and who was in the White House. So the people who are concerned about our liberty in that way, I believe, have a point. I don't disagree with them. I, however, disagree with a lot of the messaging and a lot of the blame. And like I said, the white supremacy, the racism, the anti-Semitism, like these are real issues. And it's really difficult. And I feel like that's part of the political marketing situation, because I would be with them. I would support them if they were not being so gross, because I agree that the overreach is a problem. And yet the way that they feel comfortable dehumanizing people who are not them makes it very, very difficult for me to feel like I can be in solidarity, even when I'm in solidarity with the underlying importance of not allowing the government to feel comfortable with their overreach. And at the same time, I'm 100% on board with the stay-at-home orders and with the shelter in place. It is an essential and necessary act, which we should be using as a possibility for putting infrastructure in, for increasing the possibility of medical personnel, for solving some of these small business issues so that our people have what they need to function and thrive while we deal with the impact of the virus. I'm not against the coordination and the oversight. I also recognize the concerns. And for some reason, it's really difficult as a liberal. It's interesting, right? Like, I'm a progressive. I wouldn't say I'm a Democrat. I would say I'm a progressive, and I often align with like liberal or non-traditionalist views. It's really difficult for me to find other people who understand that that particular view, even though I know they agree with the importance of like personal freedom.
And I think that's exactly it. And the reality is, one thing that's pretty clear to me is that these people that are out protesting are just a very vocal minority. Let's not forget that that's what the media is pumping up. They're covering all of this stuff, but it's a couple hundred people at any given time. That does not represent the possibly, million people in any given city where this is happening. A couple hundred people is what we call a vocal minority with guns.
With guns. And it's messed up. It's really messed up. And one of the things that I have really been reflecting on is, whatever your party or your ideology, I would say the majority of Americans have at least a healthy skepticism, if not a feeling of distrust for the government, as well as for the media's genuine interest in being committed to the truth. And therefore, what's happened, I think, is a lot of folks have gravitated to what they consider to be a trusted source, which is often really a biased form of analysis or opinion. And then they're not getting the full story. They're not getting the full spectrum of experience. They're getting, like you said, like an amplification of a minority experience. And I don't mean minority in the general sense. I mean like a minority in terms of a small amount of angry people or irrational people who are, news, essentially. And even more so entertainment.
Well, the only way to actually gauge that would be, say, a poll. And CNN and several other sources have done polls, and they're like numbers in the like high 50s, high 60s, 69% I saw on one, of people who do not feel safe going back to life as normal. Which again brings me back to a very basic concept here, which is consumer confidence. Because those people, given all of this information, have decided to save at a rate higher than it's ever been since the Reagan administration.
Financially, yeah.
Financially saving money. They're also carrying less debt than they have in the last 12 years.
Right. And interestingly, a lot of the conventional wisdom is it's really great. And in some ways it really is. However, what we also know is that we want ultimately, and this benefits obviously both large corporations and small businesses, but what we want is a sweet spot where people are, not necessarily incurring so much debt that they're living paycheck to paycheck, not so much lack of savings that they can't weather a storm. However, we want people to feel comfortable making basic purchases. And we know that the only way for that to occur right now, because reopening, there's this weird thing that's happening. We need to reopen the economy. Do you really think it's going to be the way it was 3 months ago? It's just not. It's not going to be like that.
No.
You're not going to open your business. And some places, yes, some places might see some small, but the overall pattern that we're looking at, the trend is no, it's not going to be like that.
Well, let me speak for the way that I would gather some people, possibly listeners to this show, might be feeling. One, you cannot make me go out. You cannot make me go to a restaurant. You cannot make me spend money I don't want to spend or make any large purchases. You cannot make me. And see, that's the thing. The whole point of closing things down was to take away the urge that a lot of people might feel to still go out in unsafe times. Now, it's obviously slightly safer. We are seeing some declines. I think we did peak last month. We also had more deaths than the entirety of the Vietnam War in 1 month across this country. So there's been a shift. Let me be the first to say that has shifted some things for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go and make any large purchases right now. We have friends that are buying a house, and that's great. They were planning to do it. They were set up to do it. Their jobs were safe and secure, and they've decided to do it. Kudos to them.
Well, and they're not increasing their monthly payment.
No.
The purchase of the house
is offsetting their rent.
It's not an increase, or it's very minimal increase from their rent. So they haven't changed their financial monthly expectation.
Right. And I'm a fan of home ownership. Go for it. But you can't make me go buy a car or a boat right now. You can't make me spend money on things that I don't feel are wise investments. Now, I have been shopping. I have a music studio. I've been doing all kinds of upgrades to it, partially because living and working from home for the last few months put me in this weird place where I thought, I'm just going to do all of this stuff. I'm looking at a curtain that I hung to divide the room, and where my modem used to be out here and is now in a utility closet that I built it all into. I have been spending money. I've been doing projects, but you can't make me go back to normal because I don't feel like anything is normal.
Right. Well, and the week after we closed down here in Colorado, the Wednesday after our Friday close or whatever, I had a dentist appointment for getting my teeth cleaned. And I could probably go and do that now. I think the dentists are allowed to do non-essential electoral procedures. And I've been wanting to go to the dentist in a way that I have never had. I've always enjoyed the experience of getting my teeth cleaned, and that I like how it feels, but it's not like going to the dentist is, party. And I feel a sense of I really want to get that taken care of. I don't feel ready.
Yeah.
It's not critical. I don't have any cavities. I can give it a couple months. And there's that part of me that doesn't want that to be true, right? That's I could just go. And I'm sure they're doing safety procedures and all of that. However, any exposure is a risk. And my feeling is that the longer I can wait, and we've talked about this, the longer I can wait to actually get COVID, because I do expect that I will eventually get it, the better it is. Because one, I'm delaying my impact on the medical infrastructure. And two, I'm potentially going to get it when we have more data, possibly effective treatments, potentially a vaccine or something that can decrease the impact of your situation. And for me, It seems worth not going to the dentist for a little bit.
My example is remdesivir.
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci and several other people actually said that it was showing some clear signs that it was shortening and lessening, this is a key thing, lessening the effects of and shortening the duration of a COVID-19 infection.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in trial. So if I got sick right now, I might be able to beg and plead and find a sympathetic doctor who would give it to me.
Right.
Versus in a few months when they have data in, it'll be the go-to thing. So if I get this in September and remdesivir has been proven to be effective, because that's the key. We still don't know. It was promising.
And we're hopeful.
People I trust said it was promising. This isn't a Trump thinking bleach directly injected in your veins is promising. Can we look into that?
Let's not. Thanks.
No, this is real doctors, the people I respect, saying it was promising, but it's not available yet. Not in a way that's not a trial. And they might find other things. So if I get this later this year or even early next year, they'll have more information on how to treat it, how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it benefits me to wait to get it, even if there's an inevitability to getting it.
Well, and one of the things that we were talking about before the show started, you were talking about like acceptable death. So, for example, there's one you mentioned, and it's a really great one. Like the speed limit on a road is intended to indicate what is the maximum speed for the maximum safety for that particular stretch of road, which is an understanding that maximum safety is never 100%. Some people might be injured or killed driving on that stretch of road.
Right. If you want to
even
ensure
at that speed.
100% survival on a road, set a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit.
And even that, obviously, 5 mile that people are compelled to follow, right? Like they can't deviate from it. The difference between that, which is it's a scientific analysis of the terrain based on your actions. The necro-politics situation is an analysis of the situation based on your status or
and desired
region,
outcome.
And the desired outcome. So what you're saying, like some people must die in terms of saying like, we are okay. And when I say we, I don't necessarily opt myself into this. However, culturally, we do support the system. And so in that way, I'm part of it, right? We are okay with poor immigrant workers having their lives risked to provide meat for the country, for consumer confidence, for our need to eat meat. And we're okay with not enforcing minimal safety, let alone maximum safety requirements for the same workers. And to me, that's immoral. That's the distinction between the scientific data-driven acknowledgement that some people on this terrain taking this action they get to opt into the action. Those people are taking a risk and we're trying to make it maximum safe, recognizing some people might end up having an impact that they don't desire, we don't desire, versus the people in the meat packing plant, they don't get to opt in. They're essential. They're required to go. They're not allowed to demand that their employers provide safe working conditions. They can be compelled to work by force for low wages in unsafe conditions. That's different. And it's very upsetting to me.
Yeah. And that's fundamentally my problem with it, is that at the end of the day, these decisions are not being made with our health and safety in mind. They are being made from an idea that we are basically the same as the cattle at the meatpacking plant. Acceptable losses. Somebody else is controlling life and death for us. We are supposed to play our roles and be functioning members of society as has been dictated by other people. And it's really hard. I mean, I feel like the biggest way that I can actually be an activist and protest that is say, no, you're not going to get me to do things. If I could travel right now, I won't. If I could go to a restaurant right now in this town, I won't. I will order takeout. I will do a lot of things, but I will be personally responsible for and maintain my safety within the realm of, percentage of a chance and statistical chances of exposure. But I'm going to make that decision. I'm not going to have it made for me.
Right. Well, and the other thing, we're talking about this concept of the economy versus lives. And some people saying, well, what about the economic toll and the lives that will take? And I was doing some reading on the Great Depression, partially because there's consistent comparisons, right? Like that's the first time we really had anything that's even remotely similar. And one of the things that I was reading is that the Great Depression, some people say, oh, the war is what addressed it. Kind of, right? Like the war addressed it and then a bunch of people left. It's 17 million job postings that were left. And so
they needed women to step up. We went from that high of unemployment to needing women to go and do factory jobs because there weren't enough men for them.
Right. And so but when that happened was when the war ended and people came home, the men came home and they, and this is a 100% different side conversation that I'm not going to go down, even though I really want to. And women no longer had the encouragement to take those jobs and men took them. It did increase the unemployment rate again in a different way. And there were some concerns around it in terms of like the need. And ultimately what happened was we instituted a lot of public programs. We did a lot of infrastructure work. We did the AmeriCorps program. We did the Peace Corps. We did all of these things that funded people and gave them something to do. And we did all of this like infrastructure, building roads and things for the country. And ultimately what it was we took on a lot of debt in order to pay people to do jobs until our GDP expanded again, because that's what caused the depression was our GDP shrank, which has already occurred. They said that's happening. That's reality. So we know the solution to this is the debt. It's the stimulus packages. It's the unemployment benefits. Like we know if we really want to get through this successfully, we need to do that. We need to bite the bullet, pass those programs, keep the word you're talking about, consumer confidence high so that people feel like they can engage in activity, keep going, do their job, buy, take out, whatever. And I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. However, that's a path through it that we know works. It is the only thing that we know has worked because we see it from the history of the Great Depression. And yet they're still quibbling over it because ultimately we'd rather give tons and tons of bailout money to rich people. Bezos went from being worth, $3 trillion to $5 trillion in the last 3 months.
Because everybody started ordering from Amazon.
Well, and he got money, apparently, there was a millions of dollars in the bailout packages that went to the wealthy. It's problematic at best. And yet, and I don't understand this. Somebody needs to explain this to me, why we are totally fine with saying, you have millions of dollars, let me give you more millions. But when someone has thousands of dollars or $0, we don't want to give them $1,000. It just doesn't make any sense to me. These people need it. And somehow it's let's not.
You have to look at the people making the decisions to do it. Because ultimately, a lot of rich people end up in government and they are fundamentally working to protect themselves.
I get that. However, the general population has a strong judgment on what they call the handout. And when they say, I don't want to see people get handouts, what they mean is I don't want to see this poor person being given $500 so they can eat. They almost never actually seem upset about the millionaire getting another $100,000 for something. And I feel like it was Pol Pot, the Laotian dictator, fascist, whatever, who said, part of it is our ability to comprehend scale, right? If I kill one person, I'm a murderer and it's outrageous and you're going to condemn me, right? But if I kill 1 million people, you can't handle it. Maybe you'll elect me president.
Yeah.
You can't comprehend the impact of that. And it's not like you admire me for doing it, I hope. But for some reason, the scale of impact, the more damage and harm and destruction you do, the less likely you are to be held accountable.
Well, and it's weird, right? Because I remember when this whole thing happened, Trump had gone from being fairly cavalier about everything up to and including telling everybody it was just no big deal. Mm-hmm. We have 15 cases. Oh, we have a couple hundred. It's no big deal. When he saw the first model that I think his team that he assembled brought him that said 150 to 200,000 dead. I saw one of his press conferences where it seemed to sober him a little bit, and he shifted for a very short time, unfortunately, to the sobering aspect of that high of a death toll.
Yeah.
And now I feel like they're accepting it because we're at 85. We're halfway there, and we're not really doing anything to continue mitigation on this, so it's just going to keep going up. And if it hits 100,000 in the next couple of days, it's not going to take too long for it to hit 150 in the next few months.
I think he decided it wouldn't hurt his, and I'm being incredibly speculative here. It seems to me like he decided it wouldn't hurt his chance of reelection. And I honestly don't know that I have seen Trump care about anything other than him and what he wants.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know.
But that's the whole thing. And you have one other aspect of this, which I think is what I'm truly afraid of. If you want my conspiracy theory, here's one that's pretty obvious. And it's about a certain governor in Florida.
Okay, yeah, I was just pulling up that data. Do you want me to share the...
That's why I set you up.
Oh, you're the best.
I put the ball on the tee. All you had to do is swing the bat.
Yeah, I love you. You're the best. So, Florida has decided, and by Florida, I mean state officials have stopped releasing the list of coronavirus deaths being compiled by Florida's medical examiners. And the Santis, I think Santis is the governor, but I'm not entirely sure. I haven't paid 100% attention to that.
He is.
Okay, thanks. He said he wanted, because they're reopening, and he said he didn't want people to feel like, he wanted them to feel better. So he's not releasing that information. Also, interestingly, Florida was not tracking the deaths of out-of-state residents in Florida. So if you live there or visiting, whatever, but you're a resident of somewhere else, your death is not...
like the majority of older folks that live in Florida?
Yeah, that death is not being counted or reported by Florida, nor obviously is it being counted or reported anywhere else. And one of the things that's a mentality that makes zero sense to me because it's so incredibly insane.
Oh, but it makes total sense to me. And let me just be clear. I'm about to have an InfoWars level conspiracy theory moment, but I challenge somebody to prove me wrong. And it is that in Florida, in order to protect their concept of economy, if you just don't tell people how many people are dying or how many people are sick, and they don't walk out their front door and see a sick person in front of them, then they'll just go back to normal. And it's the most dangerous and disheartening thing I have heard ever, because it is a complete manipulation by the government to get people to feel like things are fine, because you're just not going to tell them that it's not fine.
Well, and they're rolling the dice that they're right, which they aren't. The data doesn't back them up, and that people won't catch on, which is also unlikely, but it'll take a little while. They'll have a few weeks of peace. And it's a mentality I don't relate to. And I'll tell you this, like when my kids were young, I had to make a decision. And I knew a lot of parents or humans, I guess, who when they took their children to the doctor and they were supposed to get a shot, they would tell me, "Oh, no fuss, it's not going to hurt." And I always had a pretty strong commitment to like not lying to my kids. So the first time they got a shot, and they're like 4 months old, but I don't know what they can understand. I'm very clear. The doctor's about to do something that the doctor needs to do. It's giving the vaccine shot, right? And it's going to hurt really bad for about 5 to 18 seconds. And then it's going to stop hurting and you'll be done. And we need to do it because it's about you getting something you need for your health. Very simple. And that was a commitment that I had, that I would never lie to my kids about what was coming. And it's interesting because I did see like there were kids, and you've met these kids who are very afraid of things. And I think it's because they're not given the opportunity to process what's about to happen. And they don't know that someone in authority, they don't know who they can trust because they've been told this isn't going to hurt. And the reality is the parents that do that, they're not doing it because they want to deceive their kids or cause them a problem. They do it because on some level they're hopeful that it will ease their anxiety. And so there's some way, and I'm not trying to make it okay that the governor's doing this, but I do understand that instinct when you're in a position of authority to try and make it okay for people. The challenge is I couldn't change reality for them. Well, I could tell them it wasn't going to hurt. It was still actually going to hurt. There's nothing I could do about that. So what I wanted to do was teach them resilience. I wanted to teach them how to handle it. I wanted to support them in making good decisions. I wanted them to learn that sometimes you have to do something that's hard or painful because it's necessary. And this attitude of like, I'm not going to report the deaths because it's going to make people feel more comfortable. Ultimately, it's going to cause more problems because the people that are opening are less likely to be cautious. They're going to think things are fine. They're not going to necessarily wear masks. They're not going to be aware of importance of social distancing or the extra level of sterilization they may need to do. And it seems like this particular approach is likely to cause significantly more problems in the long run, even if whether it's a conspiracy thing or a lack of a cavalierness or a genuine care for like wanting to ease people's concerns, the ultimate result is bad.
Well, let me just be clear with everybody who's a resident of Florida right now. The government is lying to you. People are dying near you and they're not telling you. Yeah. So that's something that we're going to have to live with, I think, in if other places do this. Is just this reality that we don't even know what's happening. And they would rather us get back to normal than actually acknowledge that there's even something happening.
Well, and one of the arguments is that the data, right, is inaccurate. And this can be the last thing that we maybe put out there. Our models are insufficient. And part of why our models are insufficient is because we're learning new things about the virus daily, it seems like.
Young children are being afflicted with something similar to Kawasaki syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Look it up. It's terrible.
Yeah, and so we've got insufficient data and constantly evolving data and knowledge, right? We have genuine errors. For example, we didn't know early on that COVID was responsible for kidney failure and heart attacks in a lot of people. We thought it was just a respiratory concern. So we've got the lack of data or the evolving data. We've got the errors based on that information, the new information. And then we have deliberate misinformation from, say, Florida. So the reality is that the modeling that we're using is so flawed. It's very difficult to make accurate predictions or, well-founded decisions because we are missing so much information, some deliberate and some just genuine errors, right?
We've only known about this illness for 6 months. We can't possibly know all of the effects of it. And so what I would say is that in all of the hysteria about rights being taken away or, the things that you're worried about, there's not going to be a normal for a while. Yeah. And I would really caution everybody to actually stand up for their rights and determine how you're going to interact, regardless of what the government, regardless of what states and governors or city council people are saying. You need to decide what's right for you.
Yeah.
Because you cannot rely on other people to watch out for you right now. Right. Your elected officials have other agendas.
Right. And I will also add, I would love to see all of us really embrace that sense of personal responsibility and that sense of communal responsibility. So whether you're worried about getting sick or not, really think about the people that you live near, that you love, that you don't even necessarily know or like, and decide, do I want to be part of being in a true community where we actually think of each other and take responsibility for that? And if so, figure out how to do that. Wear your mask, help your neighbors, shop for the elderly, give it a try. It's a way more connective experience. And honestly, the only way we're going to get through this is if we do it together.
Absolutely. We promise that someday we'll get back to more normal formats. We haven't done a BiCurean moment in a while, but frankly, it's been crazy times. So we do thank you for listening. If you have ideas, feedback, thoughts, please find us on social media. We are BiCurean on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can always give us a call at 720-507-7309 and email us at podcast@BiCurean.com.
And this week, I'm going to make a very particular and special plea. Please rate us on your listening platform of choice. It makes such a difference to how we view in the ratings and whether or not people actually get our information. We're doing a lot of work to get good information out there, and we would really like your support in amplifying that.
Thank you.